Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Padres EVT Podcast in Focus. We're your hosts, Garcia and Willy Warren. We're back again. So, if it's Friday, you all did not miss us. We're recording this on a Thursday. It's fairly early for San Diego, but alas, we are here. We've got a lot to go on today. Our EVT Top 32 Padres prospect list just dropped, and spring trading is in the air. So, Willie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I mean, this has been probably the most exciting week that I can, recall in the past, month or so, because just baseball's back, the sounds, the sights, it's back. And that exciting feeling of just like the sport itself is back, because everybody can get excited about, trades, signings, money, all that stuff. But when everybody gets out on the field, you actually see it. It's just that awesome feeling is back. And yeah, so it's been really, really thrilling week. I've been trying to catch as much action as I can around the league, and of course trying to catch as much Padres action as possible. And I think the number one thing that everybody's probably, buzzing about that isn't, Connor Griffin of the Pittsburgh Pirates is the ABS challenge system, because this year it's not just a test, it's sticking. And this is not just like, oh, let's just do this for fun. Let's keep planning for the future. Like, this is now planning time for teams and strategies. And I want to get your first take on ABS actually, what you've seen so far from this new ABS system now that we know it's going to be used in real play.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I think the ABS system was long overdue. We've been seeing it in the minor leagues a little bit for the last couple of years, but quite frankly, the results have been great so far. I mean, it helps when Padres catchers are, I believe, 7 for 8 in using the ABS challenge system. We don't need to talk about how they're doing at the plate. That's very different from how you're doing, behind the dish with the ABS system. But it's the biggest thing that sticks out to me outside of Freddie Fermin and his usage of the ABS system is just how simple it is. Really, it's just they put it on the screen, they tell you if it's a ball or strike, life goes on. Like, because I remember a couple of years ago when they were first introducing the system, there was this whole hiccup of, oh, they're replacing umpires with robots, yada, yada, yada. It's like, no, they're just having a scan of the strike zone compared to the batter. It's one of the funniest things I ever saw. Every player had to get their height measured specifically so that they would be able to calibrate the ABS system. And, according to, broadcast and stuff, we're finding out players' real heights because everyone is like used to adding maybe an inch to their height, because it's like when you go to the doctor and they put that thing up on your head that like stuck there. You're like, hey, count my hair too. And I will say it because they always put that thing down on my head, and I have like fairly like puffy hair, I guess. But I know there are some players you can relate to that. But the biggest thing is just it's so simple to use, and I'm kind of glad that we are seeing it, because there are going to be times where, and we've seen this already, it's been like by the slightest of slight margins. I think that in and of itself will, cause a few gripes, mostly among fans. But at the same time, when you are Ty France and you're winning a challenge by a hair's width, like, I mean, if you're a Padres fan, you take that every day.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think my biggest thing so far with it has been it's just fun. And I think it's an element of just enjoyment that like you can like any game around the league. I mean, it doesn't matter, like this, like the score can be big, like close, it can be a huge blowout, whatever. Like when that thing comes up, when you see the the batter tap their helmet, or the catcher, the pitcher, it's like when you see that, you kind of you look up and like it's a really fun thing to see. And, I think watching them overturn it is like one of the most, kind of fun little things I've seen as like a fan. And I think that's going to make the overall enjoyment of watching just for national, on the like national scale of things. I think that's going to make it a lot more fun just to see that. And so I think, us, outside of, Freddie Fermin being four for four and Luis Campisano being 2 for 3, I think that just overall, I think it's fun. And I think it's, it's just making the game way more exciting, and I mean, yeah, I didn't feel this way last year. I just kind of felt like it was like new stuff that we never really see, but not like now kind of seeing that it's going to be used. And I think it just, kind of like you said, it's long overdue. And I do think it really, it really adds like a fun, it adds a fun element of strategy instead of a like feeling of over correcting umpires mistakes. Like I feel like that's at least for me, like I like that element of strategy is there instead of the overcorrection feel.
Oh, most definitely. I know we've heard, Craig Stammen talk about it. We've heard managers around their league kind of talk about how it's going to be. It is a strategy thing because you only get 2 of them and you don't want to burn both of them out by the middle of the 3rd inning. Because who knows, when it's the 8th inning, you got bases loaded with 1 out, and that pivotal count does not go your way. You're really gonna wish you had that challenge in your back pocket. And it's really going to be fascinating to see how it's used, because there are some teams already who are telling their pitchers not to use it. Some teams pitchers who are just, I'm not going to use it. Like we saw Chris Sale be very verbal about that fairly early on in the process. So every team situation is going to be really interesting to follow with, how they choose to approach that, because it is a new tool, but it's also another element of the game strategy. So that'll definitely be something fun to watch. Speaking of things that are fun to watch, the Padres spring training so far, there's been some names. There's been some names who have been pretty fun to watch. And, a lot of us are excited that, a lot of the regulars are getting back into action. Like, how's Nick Castellanos going to hold up at first base? What's the lineup going to look like have been the bigger questions. But there's been quite a few guys who are, really putting up some stats early on. And, one guy in particular we can highlight because he's kind of been all over the place right now, is Romeo Sanabria, who, if you watched yesterday, I believe it was yesterday's game against the Angels, they're mentioning it's the spring of Sanabria, which is like, it's a nice alliterative gesture. I'm going to be completely upfront. I'm eating my words big time with seeing him play. Is it a tiny sample size? Yes, but I did not think the bat was going to translate this much against, major league pitching, near major league pitching. Because on our top 32 prospect list, he came in at 29 for me, simply because I wasn't sure how much the bat was going to take a step forward going from year to year. But what have you seen from Sanabria so far?
Yeah, I mean, there's there's kind of a few things that stats can't really track, and I think that finding the barrel with consistency against good pitching, or at least pitching that made the major league camp, like I think that that's the biggest thing is like, I mean, he's hit 2 doubles, home run, I believe he's hit another hard hit ball somewhere. Like, I mean, he's finding the barrel consistency like very frequently, which is something that you don't really see kind of those non-roster invites do. Like you might see them go for a big blast, or go like 6 for 10 to start the spring with like 6 softly hit singles. But to have someone just come out of double A and then instantly get catch barrel after barrel against good pitching, is like that's the biggest thing that really that stands out, is the fact that you've heard multiple loud sounds come off his bat in the first week, which is, quite honestly not the player we expected that those loud sounds to come from at this point in the season, and or at this point in the spring. But yeah, he's definitely stood out among the non-roster guys so far as, definitely making the loudest contact. And, he's tied for the team lead with 6 runs batted in so far. So, I mean, yeah, he's making the most of this chance here. This isn't his first big league spring training. So he's used to it and he's been here before. And, it's really awesome to see him, making the most of this.
Oh, definitely. Something I'm noticing, the more that I watch him, is it looks to me like, just based on the eye test, I'll have to, go back in later and kind of see the numbers side by side. But it looks like he's shortened up his swing a little bit. The swing looks a lot smoother compared to last year. Sure, he did have that one swing last year, which was like that one insane bat flip after the homer, but that swing was still fairly long. It looks like he's shortening up at the end of the swing, getting through the baseball a lot more. And I think, if he's able to continuously find the barrel, I think we legitimately have a chance of seeing him in the major leagues this year. I don't think he starts the year at AA again because the Padres are very aggressive with their prospects, but it could definitely be interesting to see, what he can bring. Because if he goes to AAA, he's gonna hit like 350 for like 2 months, and then they're gonna have no choice but to call him up. Especially if some of the bench players don't really live up to expectations. And I know you mentioned to me before the show that there's been some guys who have done things this spring training. Another guy I want to point out, Samad Taylor, former top prospect with the Blue Jays, goes to the Royals, then to the Mariners. But what have you seen out of him? Because I think he's in a really tough spot to compete for like that utility role, because there's like 6 other guys who can do exactly what he's doing. But what have you seen from him?
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of one of those guys who you don't really feel like they're given that huge chance to compete. Like it doesn't feel like they're really in the mix for a spot, or like they're kind of off the radar. But I mean, he's made some really, really loud sounds as well, and like you said, he's played barely like a few games here and there with Seattle, and former top prospects like that didn't work out. Like it's really like good to remember with like these type of players that talent sometimes doesn't go anywhere. They're just figuring it out. And I mean he's still showing us. He put up a 106.8 mile an hour exit velocity the other day, and like that's the Padres' 9th hardest hit ball all spring so far. Like that talent, I don't think has gone anywhere. It just is kind of a matter of rediscovering it for him, which I'd love. He'll definitely get a ton of time throughout the spring, especially when the guys go off for the World Baseball Classic. And I'm just kind of intrigued to see, can he keep it up? Can he, actually put himself in the mix to, not just spend the entire season like fulfilling his minor league contract in the minor leagues, but he could actually, could he actually become a depth piece, as and spend some time on the major league bench?
Yeah, there's definitely a case for him, because he does have the positional versatility to do so, as well as the batted ball metrics so far are definitely backing that up. For those of you listening at this moment, take a moment and try to think, who do you think has the Padres' hardest hit ball of spring training? Let's give our listeners 3, 4, 5. Go ahead. Who's got the hardest hit ball?
Hardest hit ball belongs to Marcos Castañon. And
How hard was it?
110.9 miles an hour, topping Fernando Tatis, topping Luis Campusano, Samad Taylor, Jackson Merrill, and Jose Miranda. Those are like I mean, that's interesting. That's what spring training is all about. We finally get this data out, and like we get to see where players are who, it's really pure statistical speculation in the off season about how they could improve, how they could regress, and yeah, like that's, I think, the most exciting thing in this first week that we're getting is, finding out stuff like this. I mean, I don't think anybody expected that. I think everybody expected maybe someone named Tatis to have that, but yeah, that was a big shocker early on for sure.
It's surprising to me because I genuinely forgot he hit a ball that hard. And it's really interesting because last year Marcos Castellanos spent most of the year at AA. He gets like a 2-week call up to AAA at the end of the year, and he just goes off at AAA. I think he hit like 364 with an OPS of like 900, which was really it was impressive because he's a guy who had kind of run into some struggles at AA over the last couple of years, but last year he was arguably the most consistent hitter for the missions. So, when we did our EVT and a year awards, he ended up getting the MVP for the missions, as well as their like offensive player of the year, if you will. But it's interesting that some of these guys are like, there's a nice healthy blend of non-roster guys and major league players, because that tends to mean that the non-roster guys are inviting can hit the ball, which is what you want to see. Because there are times where you'll see a guy in spring and he goes like 1 for 20 or something like that, and you're like, we brought in this guy when we could have brought in that guy on another team who was also an on-roster guy who's, hitting like, I don't know, 10 for 25 or something. And you mentioned Jose Miranda early on, like that. I know we've talked about him a couple times on the show, but did you expect this high of production from Jose Miranda when he got signed?
No, I mean, I don't think anybody did either. That's probably the biggest shocker if Romeo Sanabria isn't the biggest shock, is that he is 6 for 9 with 2 doubles, a home run, 2 walks, and no strikeouts. Has not struck out once. He has 11 trips to the plate, and he has 3 extra base hits and has not struck out once. That's, I mean, for someone who was kind of, I would say, positioned behind, France, Nick Castellanos, Sung Monsong, and of course Miguel on Duhar to be that kind of right-handed, or I guess SMS isn't a right-handed, but kind of to be that infield depth piece. I feel like he was given probably the smallest chance, or like the smallest possibility of it going in, probably by most fans. And I think all of a sudden you're looking at Miranda, a guy who's not just a minor league, major league kind of flip flop kind of guy. Like he's played big. He's spent a lot of time in the major leagues, and for him to have this kind of spring, it's like, oh, here's a major league experienced player who's not a super old veteran, and yeah, here he is right now, going 6 for 9, out hitting everybody, and kind of think, yeah, that this feels now like somewhat of a front runner to make the big league roster. Like, in what capacity, that is still to be figured out and all that, but you feel like you can't turn down a spring like that, at least when it comes to giving him a bench spot.
Most certainly. It really, like, he's made it a competition if there wasn't a competition already. Like 6 for 9 with 2 walks and no strikeouts. It's it's your dream kind of 3-game stretch at the plate for anyone, but he's made it count. He's not only 6 for 9. Is he also tied for the team league in RBIs?
Yes, with 6.
Okay.
Mhm.
And that tracks because I know he had the 2-run homer, he had the big double in the other game. So he is like every big at bat that you want a guy to have, he's stepped in and he's delivered in that sort of spot. The batted ball metrics are all backing it up as well. He's made some pretty hard contact. When he's stepped up to the plate, it feels like it's always barreled. I know, again, small sample, but he is hitting the ball pretty hard and pretty consistently as well. I don't know if he was doing much of that last year, just off the top of my head, but I think he's definitely found something. Has he found lightning in a bottle potentially? But I really think he wants to be in the room where it happens. When you put it all together at the end of the day, and it's interesting because those of us who follow the great Sam Levitt, who does the post game, the pre games. He put it out yesterday. I believe it was either yesterday or 2 days ago, that little known fact that Jose Miranda, the Lin-Manuel Miranda connection, and it's true, but I also thought, like, at this point pretty much everyone knows that because he's been around the league for like 4 years. So they haven't had a shortage of chances to throw that out there, but yeah, he's made it a competition for one of those bench spots, and I think he is definitely one of those guys where if someone has to go on the IL, you feel pretty comfortable calling him up, plugging him into the lineup. There's definitely a lot to take in with that. Another part about spring training that's really fun to see is we don't get to see a lot of the backfield action that takes place unless you're physically in spring training. But yesterday we got to see a pretty interesting video of Cruz Schoolcraft is throwing to hitters, in the backfields, thanks to Jesus Cano of Baseball America. He looked nasty, quite frankly. He looked like he was doing really well out there. He's apparently touching 95 to 97. So he's not even in midseason form, and he's already throwing this hard. Did you get a chance to see that video?
I believe I saw a little clip of it. And I mean, he's now the Padres' new number 1 prospect. By the new MLB.com ranking, and yeah, I mean, just that kind of news. With how thin, according to national evaluators, this farm system is huge news to see that your top guy is throwing 95, 97 to start the year. Like, that's just heartwarming, feel good. Like, there's no issue, there's no injury, like, oh, he's like, his stuff isn't down or stuff like that. That's just is a really warming feeling to see that, and the fact that it's so early in spring training too, that he's facing live hitters, and it's a really good sign that he'll be able to have one of those big sample size seasons where you see him pitch potentially over 100 innings, which would be huge for him to try to make a jump in some of the rankings, because he's someone who definitely suffers a little bit from people not knowing enough about him, because I mean,
Yeah.
like I think we mentioned a couple weeks ago, he's only made 1 start in affiliated ball in at like Elsinore, and so yeah, that's, I mean, huge news. Really excited to see what he does, and he could be someone next year at this time. Like, he could be someone who's pitching on the main fields instead of the backfields, and that's also really exciting that he could we could see him in big league spring training as soon as next year.
Yeah, that's very true. If he has a big season, I think. So one of the interesting things about seeing him throw out there, not like outside of the insane extension and the velocity, is hitters are not doing well timing him up. He faced quite a few other top guys and a couple other guys from his draft class in the video. It's kind of hard to make out some of the names because not only are they all righties, so like at the angle that you're looking at, the nameplate is like looking away from you. So the only time you really see the name is when they swing, and even then you have to like pause it at the right moment so it's not blurry. But he was facing Ryan Weidman, Ty Harvey, and Truett Madonna were some of the guys that he was facing. I was impressed with their swings because I can imagine that is not easy to face down as a hitter, especially when because Cruz not only does he have insane extension, but he also has like a really low vertical approach angle. So that ball is sneaking up on you even more than it already would if if he's coming at you from a normal angle. And I thought, all of the contact was going opposite field, so they were consistently late on his fastball. So it must look like it's coming in 99 to 101 just based on some of the swings. Like there were some uncomfortable swings against Chris Schoolcraft yesterday. And when I put him on our top 32, he ended up coming in at number 2, but it's really a 1A 1B sort of situation because you have the upside of a number 1 starter and the upside of a starting caliber catcher. And both things are incredibly hard to find, especially when you sign them that young. Like projecting, because Salas right now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's barely 20.
Yeah.
So he would be a sophomore catcher in college, not even draft eligible unless he meets like the age cutoff or something. So he's still very much in development, especially considering he missed a ton of time. And we've seen him in spring training. He's doing pretty well defensively. He's 1 for 1 on the ABS challenge, even though that ball was right down the middle. But that was such a fun. That's such a weird sequence of events because you've got DJ Sutton on the mound, who they signed off of Twitter, which is honest, no, legit.
No,
Like
that's true. That's actually
it's
true.
a fun. That's like spring training gives you all these insane stories. Like because you see, DJ Snelton threw a fastball right down the plate. The umpire called it a ball. Salas challenged it. But when you describe it like, a guy they signed off of Twitter threw a ball right down the middle and the umpire called it a ball. Like it's pretty comedic stuff. But so Salas has been successful with the ABS challenges. Granted, it's one challenge, but we'll take it. And offensively, there have been some concerns about the bat. I think he just needs a little time to really settle in because he hasn't seen competitive pitching in a long time. Like last year, as of September, he was still kind of not swinging the bat, and it wasn't until the offseason where he was actually able to, get back into swinging again. So I think with Ethan Salas, definitely want to see him play more in spring training, if that's possible. I think, we'll hear that he's doing backfield stuff because he's going to have to learn some of these guys who's going to have to catch. And, a lot of the like prospect report day was on Tuesday, the 24th. So, we've seen, guys are reporting, guys are hitting, guys are throwing now. And I think like with Salas, like we get to see him a little more before, he ends up having to go mostly do backfield stuff but I think with the WBC coming up, it's a great opportunity for him to get some playing time.
Yeah, he's someone who's kind of does suffer a ton from not having time to kind of build up as a hitter against different pitching. I mean, because we all kind of know that with the pitching side of things, like if you're not ready or you're coming back from something, like you are protected like a king. Like we're only going to throw you 10 pitches, so only going to throw you 15. We're going to let you face 2 hitters, like it is such a careful thing. But with the hitting side of things, it's completely different, like completely the opposite. As Salas is he's coming back from an injury, and now, hey, face major league talent. Like, I mean, that's not easy for any hitter. I mean, we'll see MLB regulars like struggle against struggle big time to start the season, and then like a catcher who's learning like major league and minor leagues pitchers, and he's and then he's going to go have to face major league pitch major league pitching on the other side of things when he's going to go hit. Like that's a really tough spot to be thrown into as someone who's coming off a back injury like that. I mean, there's no buildup. There's no like, we'll like have you face, like there's just really no, kind of protection from that. And that's why I'm not really too bought into the struggles or like it's only getting, it's just getting worse. He's going to keep going down. Like time is, like he could have an entire first three, four, months just finding his timing, finding his stroke, and like it's only past then will I start really being kind of like, okay, like we should start being a little worried about that. Like, I mean, I think we definitely, time is the answer, and time is probably what he deserves in this spot that he's been thrown into. So yeah, I mean, definitely cannot be overreacting to how he's looked so far.
Yeah, most definitely. It's really interesting you mentioned how, for pitchers, it kind of feels like they're bubble wrapped and, you put them in a box and like it feels like there's that much protection because as hitters, like to get back in the progression, they need to see more pitches, which is the exact opposite of kind of how pitchers, work their way back. That's one of the fascinating dichotomies in baseball. Just the way back is very much the opposite as a hitter than it would be as a pitcher. But at the same time, there's still, there are skills that are getting reinforced on the road back. And, I would think with some of the guys who are in spring training, because even to be an all-star, you have to be successful a third of the time or less, between 30 to 35% of the time. So, of course, there is a lot of like you're not going to see every pitcher very well. There are some pitchers who are harder to hit than others, and players will tell you that. They'll be like, there's one guy I don't want to face. It's this guy. Like we saw John Boy Media was kind of going around interviewing players, and Jackson Merrill was saying he's glad that Mason Miller's on their team. That was pretty notable because correct me if I'm wrong. I think I'm correct, but correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he hit a walk-off home run against Mason Miller?
He did actually hit a walk-off home run, and it landed about 5 seats to my left and off Mason Miller. And I remember all I was saying is, this is not a good matchup. He's coming in. I mean, like this is, we might as well wait till extra innings to go get like a walk-off. And sure enough, the thing flew right down the line. I mean, it was sick. And so that was really kind of a shock that he said that. I almost like, it's a little concerning. Like, I guess he did hit it off his slider, and he was mentioning how he doesn't want to face the fastball. So I guess I'll give him grace there. But that was a little interesting answer from him.
Yeah, wasn't it? That was the same. That was 2 years ago now. That was the same year where because he got Edwin Diaz in a very similar location as well. I remember that one as well. So, hopefully we see more of that in 2026, considering they'll be seeing Edwin Diaz a little bit more than they're used to.
Oh yeah.
I would imagine. But, this spring training is really interesting. I know you mentioned a guy who we haven't mentioned yet, Jace Bowen, who they signed to a minor league deal back in November. He has had some pretty hard hit balls as well. He's another, I think he's kind of like a power speed kind of guy, if I remember correctly. I know I wrote up something on him a while ago. I'm just trying to remember where I put it. But, with the guys like him, Nick Schnell is another guy who, is just kind of there. Like these are guys who are probably more likely than not to see at AAA this year. At least that's where they're kind of projected. It's an interesting spring training because it's not been the lineup stuff has been interesting too. I want to get your thoughts on that because our our EVT writers are they're having a very spirited conversation about what to do with the lineup. I think that if you're a Padres fan or someone following the Padres, you are definitely having your thoughts about the lineups so far. I
I
don't know what
mean,
your thoughts are, folks out
yeah,
there. There's some very colorful takes on the lineup, but from what you've seen, what are your takes on the lineup and kind of what to
yeah.
expect?
I mean, the very first thought you have when you see Fernando Tatis in the 4 hole is, oh, is he going to hit home runs again? Because if this means that he's going to swing for home runs, then you're like, okay, awesome. We're going to get elite defense, 30 plus homers, we hope. And, like you kind of hope to get that big swinging, definitely take some contact out of the picture a little bit. And, you hope you're getting 35 home runs out of that version of him. However, if you're having now more of a kind of power speed contact, who he only hit 25 home runs last season, and I do believe there's better options in the 4 hole if it's the exact same version of him that we saw last year. However, I guess it is a little scary to see Xander Bogaerts in the leadoff spot. Just kind of thinking, he's been at times. Oh yeah, like he looks like a guy who should be leading off for this, this team. But that's at his peak. That's usually in the second half, and it is a little scary to see, like, is he going to hit 200 at the top of the lineup and then force a change, and then everything kind of spirals into, no set or order? Because I think one thing that really stayed constant in their best season in 2024 recently is that the lineup stayed, the exact same after they got Luis Ariz, and after, I guess, Tatis did go down with that injury and slid it down a little bit. But for in general, that lineup stayed so consistent. Profar 3, Manny 4. When when Tatis came back, like that was something that I do think is really valuable to a team, to have that kind of stick, because then players can figure out their role. They can get a feel for what they need to do. And so yeah, that kind of does feed into, like, if we're going to get 30 plus bombs out of Tatis because he's hitting in the 4 hole, then I mean, I'm happy with that. But in just seeing how everybody hit in the season prior, it's definitely a little unconventional, and I'd be a little bit concerned about the better players not getting as many at-bats.
True, there's definitely a few concerns. I think but when it comes to Fernando, if he's hitting, if he's on, like they're gonna have a pretty strong top of the order. I think having Bogarts and Merrill at the top of the order, I'm not against that. I think if Xander can carry over what he did last year, I know most of the people listening probably know who Divine Sports Gospel is. They were calling it the Summer of Xan, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I think I remember them
Yeah.
doing something like that. But if Xander can keep up, that second half that he had, I think they're going to be in a good spot leadoff wise, because I don't think he's ever really been a leadoff hitter. He's mostly been between the 2 and the 4 hole. Because I know when the Red Sox last made the playoffs in 2021, he was their 3 or their 4 hole hitter. I remember him hitting that home run off Zach Greinke in Boston. But it's going to be interesting because he was on basing over 300 in summer last year. So it'll be fun to see. I think the biggest gripe that I have with the lineup, it's not really a gripe. I guess it'd be more of a nitpick. It's just that you have so much depth that Ramon Laureano is hitting 7th. And me, I wish he was hitting a little higher. I was kind of hoping he hit 5th, right behind Fernando, and then you have Sheets coming in after him, because I think Jake Cronenworth, for as good as he was last year, I think if you have him in the 8 hole, kind of be your another sort of high on base guy, ahead of Freddie Fermin, and then you bring it back to the top of the order, I think you have more chances at scoring runs that way. He's been very consistent, in the back half of the lineup, and because I think last year was his highest on base percentage for Jake, because he's consistently been able to get on base, and you want that, deep in the lineup. Last year he on base 367, so he's been pretty good at getting on base, at least the last couple of years. Last year's highest, it was Fernando and then Jake in terms of on base percentage. It is by 0.001. So Fernando's on base was 368, Jake's was 367, so it's very close. What do you think is the optimal spot for Jake Cronenworth in this lineup?
Yeah, I personally love him hitting, hitting eighth, ninth, probably eighth, with just the kind of state of the, last kind of spot that probably is going to be reserved for Freddie Fermin. But yeah, I mean, he is the king of on base now. He's, the king of hit by pitches. I believe he had 13. I don't know how good his on base percentage would be without those, but he definitely profiles as someone that you want to set the table, and not someone that you want to get on base, and then 2 outs, bases loaded. That's probably where you want Ramon Laureano instead. And so, yeah, I do think eight's the perfect spot for him. It's not really putting him in a spot where he has to drive in a ton of runs, and he can be really patient and really selective with the pitches he swings at. And yeah, I think that high on base with the occasional pop, when he catches a change up out in front, like, I think that's really the perfect spot for him. And yeah, I'm also on your in your boat that I do think Laureano should be hitting behind Fernando at number 5. I mean, in terms of him versus Sheets, they both had a breakout year last season, but I mean, you've got to trust Laureano's breakout just a little bit more, just because of how good it was, and there's kind of room for natural regression in that, to where he's still going to be a really solid hitter, even if he's 10% worse than he was the year before.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. Like, even if there's some regression to the mean, he's still good. The batted ball metrics are still really good. Like, there's a good amount of red on that Savant page, so he is he's in a good spot. And this is one of the things that teams with lineup depth are going to have to face. You have a lot of good hitters, and you have to figure out how you're going to stack them all up. And I think with Laureano, you definitely see him hit higher in the lineup. If, say, Castellanos is in there at first base against a tougher lefty, like, we'll definitely see him batting 5th, because they're going to want Castellanos in the lineup, but he's probably going to hit a little bit lower, because going off of last year, I think you put Laureano ahead of him in the lineup pretty easily.
Yeah.
So that's going to be really interesting to watch. And then the rotation battle has been happening. JP Sears threw on, I believe, Monday. It was an outing. His off-speed stuff looked pretty good. But it's hard to beat around the bush. He did get knocked around for 4 runs in one outing. Again, it's just one outing, so I know you and I were like, okay, like, immediately, that's a very small sample size of just 29 pitches. We can't really jump to very many conclusions off that. One thing I did notice with Sears that was really interesting, and I think I'm noticing this more and more as we look at the Padres, pitching on the side of things. His IVB was up about 3 inches while he lost 2 inches of horizontal break. Like, he's getting more lift on that fastball compared to last year. I don't know if that's, now that he's had a chance to work with the Padres coaches full time, or if it's just been a result of something they're implementing now. But the Padres are starting to steer into, the sort of high riding fastball compared to the two plane that they've preferred in seasons past. We're seeing it out of Nick Pivetta, Jeremiah Estrada have kind of been at the forefront of that. But it seems like they're finding a healthy balance of both, which is, I mean, as an opposing hitter, you're not thinking about, oh, there's like 21 inches of IBB, or like, oh, there's this much horizontal break. You're just thinking it looks like it's going to go upwards, and that's true. And it's fun because when you get a guy like, because we've seen Garrett Hawkins throw, I believe, twice now, and the results have been absolutely nasty. Like, I know I'm getting comments that are like, how is the fastball like in 110, 120 grade with that extension? Because like it's coming 7 feet off the ground. That's part of the extension. He has, like, I knew his arms angle was high. I didn't realize it was that obscenely high 82 degrees that is just like, because I've got a soft spot for guys who throw from an insanely high angle. Like, I know that Jared Kolar was a guy that I've hyped up on the show and on past EVT shows before, because like he's got a really, like, he's up there. He's like 85-degree arm angle with like 5.5 feet, 5.6 feet of extension. It's really funky. But seeing Hawkins, like, I see a little bit of Trey Savage in there, but the angle is just even higher. Like, that changeup looks like it's in slow motion.
Yeah, no, it's crazy because guys like him, when he throws so hh and it's such a high angle, it's like you almost move his pitch movement plot like up, like you just kind of bring it up a little bit. I think his changeup, where I have it on my plot right here, is where some bad fastballs are in terms of 11.6 horizontal and 9.4, almost 10 induced vertical break, which is that's a bad fastball. Like, that's crazy.
Bad sinker. It's a bad fastball.
But it's wild because then he has his four seamer averaging 20 inches of vertical break there, and then his changeup is such. I mean, it has a 7.3 degree vertical approach angle right now, which is absurd, and it does play more like a Trey Savage like splitter kind of, in the way that it's just such a sharp. It goes from a really, really flat fastball to like just a hard. It comes in at 87, and it's just a sharp drop. And I do think it outplays the stuff plus. I think it outplays that. And yeah, I mean, definitely higher on him after seeing the data after these couple of outings. It's been really, really exciting.
Oh, most definitely. I know seeing him get the save the other day was really interesting too, because he brought out the breaking ball that day. It's like, because the fastball's always there, but Savant was tracking it as, I believe, a slider, and it was, or a cutter. It's weird because Savant has done this thing where it tracks hard sliders as cutters, and then as a result, you're like, oh, the stuff grade's not that good, but that's because it's classifying it as a cutter instead of a slider. And with Hawkins, it's so far, I don't know what he's going to do next time. Is he going to break out a different like secondary pitch? Because it very much feels like it's been the breaking pitch of the day in every particular outing. I don't know if that's by design, but I know he does have, the ability to have two distinct breaking balls, and that's something that he worked on coming back from TJ. Because even as a starter, he was posting strikeout rates this high. Like, he was 10 to 11 Ks per nine. The command's always been there, but now that he doesn't have to worry about throwing 100 pitches in an outing, 80 to 100 in an outing, like, he can just go out there and let it eat. And it has been, it's part of the reason why we think they're going to trade someone, because he's been doing so well so far that you can't help but just think, how is this guy not going to make the opening day roster? Like,
yeah,
he's held his own. Like, he came into bases loaded and he got out of it. And he was just like, okay, here, fastball, try and hit it. And it's like, no, because weren't like half those fastballs like right down the middle?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's still gonna hit it.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, wild how well this, bullpen group is coming along, like looking forward to, the season. And yeah, to do my best job of using Padres Twitter terminology. Yeah, there's too many demons. There's too many demons. There can only be eight demons, and they might end up with more of those before the season starts. And yeah, so it would be really interesting to see what they do, because he's in a spot where now, after you see what he's doing, you don't want to send him to El Paso. You don't want his stock to drop like that. But then again, there are major league ready guys just waiting in the wings, as I think Kevin AC said the other day. Brian Hoeing he's expected to be assured a spot in the starting pen. I know, same exact reaction here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's just so much depth there that you almost feel like they've got to do something with it on the trade front before the value kind of starts to drop down from its peak, which I would definitely I would say that the peak of this is as soon as this data came out on Garrett Hawkins.
Definitely.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of other prospect arms who've actually seen some time in spring training. We saw Jagger Haynes start the game the other day, started the opener, and then he made an appearance, I believe, yesterday out of the bullpen. I know the stuff's not great. I know we were talking about this yesterday. Like, the stuff isn't like fly off the page sort of thing, but something that I found really interesting was the shape of his slider. It looks tighter than it did last year, because I remember last year the slider was a bit slurvy. It had a lot of sweep to it, but now it's a tighter fall off the table bullet slider. I know that Jesse and Tony kind of equated it to Dylan Cease's slider type of action. Like, I like it. It reminds me a little bit of Matt Strom. The more that I'm seeing Jagger Haynes, he's giving me 2019 Matt Strom vibes in a good way, because like, I don't know if the stuff is going to hold up long term out of the rotation, especially if righties keep hitting it as hard as they have. Like, again, the home run he allowed was against a right-hander. So, but I think, if he's hitting 91 to 94, like, he very well could be a Matt Strom type of guy.
Yeah, no, his new slider shape is definitely really, really odd, because he's just a guy who throws a lot of stuff on the horizontal plane. Like, everything's kind of going, to the side, and now I have his his new slider is going for negative 0.5 induced vertical break, which is, that's impressive for someone who throws that from that, that kind of side angle to get it all the way down below, and to get it actually in the negative in terms of, induced vertical break, which is really impressive. And definitely not the kind of sweeper shape, not the we're just gonna get it going like that. Like, now it's kind of like a two plane type of look, and that's really gonna, I think, help him get more ground balls. Avoid the fly of avoid the fly balls and stuff, and that'll help him, especially when he gets to AAA, which probably should be next season. So I think that's huge for him. Definitely great job by you to see that and pick up on that. So yeah, that's really intriguing and definitely worth watching, as we get a bigger sample size.
Definitely. Although based on this, I'm going to be bold and I'm going to say that they're going to be aggressive. I think they're going to start him at AAA. I don't think that they have him face high level competition unless they were planning on having him start the year at AAA. And the thing with Haynes that, I think I'm a little more optimistic on him at AAA because he doesn't allow a ton of hits. It's the walks that have been really the issue for him. And we haven't really seen a ton of walks, in his 3 innings out there this spring. Another guy who's probably going to join him at AAA is Francis Pena, who I think we've seen him twice now in spring training, if I'm not mistaken, because I know he appeared either yesterday or 2 days ago. So he's been out there twice. The velo drop from 2024 to now, it's not as big a concern because I think he's finding some pitchability with what he's got. And I want to know, do the numbers back that up?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the years with him, he's had a lot of kind of variation and how just how hard he's throwing at certain times. Like we've seen him up to 99.7. We've also seen him at 92. It's I'm very probably thinking that this is just like they kind of start slow with him. He's not going to be close to mid-season form at this point in terms of as far as velocity goes. But yeah, I mean, he's still clocking 7.4 to 7.5 feet of extension, which is even more than he was in the year before. He was in the strike zone like 60% of the time, which is huge because walks are a huge thing for him. And yeah, the stuff is still disgusting. I mean, he gets a 102 overall stuff plus grade across all of his pitches so far, and that is with I think one really bad four seam fastball that I think misclassified as a sinker. I think it was supposed to be actually a two-seamer. But yeah, I definitely think he's only going to start throwing harder and harder, and we should see the kind of stuff start to tick up from there.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with the statement about the stuff, because he's been one of those guys where the stuff looks great, but then you see the results and it's kind of like, okay, he's figured there's definitely some kinks to iron out here. Like he's still figuring it out. I don't know if he's ever going to touch 99 consistently again, because he really struggled in that department last year, because it's just such a fly open delivery. It's very aggressive, and while that helps, it can be a little hard to repeat. And he ran into that a bit last year at AAA. But I think if he can even sit 95 to 96 consistently and use the sinker and the slider effectively, like he's a very different arm than when he was first getting hyped 2 years ago and it went up 3 levels of the minor leagues. But he can still be a serviceable middle reliever down the line. And that's when I wrote about him in my write-up, because I think he came in somewhere in the 20s.
I believe at 25 you had him at number 25 there. Yeah.
He's at 25 now. He made the top 20 last year. Even through his struggles, his ERA was over a 5, his FIP was over a 5. His ex-Wobacon, which is ex-Woba on contact, for those of us who are first hearing that, was 141. It was really low. So he's not allowing a ton of hard contact. It's just that when he was allowing hard contact, I mean, it's PCL hard contact, which is a breed of its own that I think at this point we're all used to hearing the stories about the PCL and the Luis Campusano statue that'll probably be built someday. But we've definitely we've covered a lot today, which I think we've gone kind of all over, from guys who are doing well in spring or prospects who are breaking out, and we've come, like, to those of you listening, I hope you've enjoyed this kind of spattering of a show that we've put together, because there's just so much to talk about. It's a great time to be a baseball fan. The WBC starts next week, and I think we're all very excited to see how the teams are going to do. That's like we're really like, it's baseball season now. There's no doubt about it. It's baseball season, and we cannot wait for it to just get started. I know if the spring breakout rosters are not out by next week when we record, we'll probably be projecting what those will look like. So if you want to know, prospects to keep an eye out on, there's quite a few. Again, read the top 32. It's linked in the description below. Because it's not just 32. There are some honorable mentions. Oh, I almost forgot. So yesterday, Cruz Schoolcraft is throwing on the backfields, right? And another guy who's thrown on the backfields along with him is Luis Gutierrez, who literally barely missed the cut. Like, he would have been number 33 if I'd gotten higher than 32. Like, he's the last sort of honorable mention. He's hitting 98 now. Yeah. Everything's up in terms of velo. Because last year, he was hitting 91 to 93. He made it up to AAA for like one start, and he was sitting 90 to 92. And this is according to Bob Scanlon, who was watching this, seeing all the information right in front of him. So according to Scan, Gutierrez is hitting 98 now, and everything's up. So he is fully healthy now. You mentioned earlier that, evaluating the Padres system on the outside, the system doesn't look like a particularly strong one. And then we hear things like this story. So I will ask you this, as someone who's watched the Padres minor leagues, and someone who watches quite a lot of ball. For anyone who's an outside observer, is this system the hardest to evaluate?
I mean, absolutely. I will just say this, that when your scouting and player development team is so good that you can bring up some player, some pitcher that your co-host has never heard of, that made a 5-mile-an-hour jump in velocity, went from 91 to 93 to 95 to 98. That is all you need to hear when you hear that AJ Preller always restocks, replenishes his farm system. That's how. That is as good of an example as you will get into the reason why we don't listen to the national media as much when it comes to ranking just how good these guys are. Because I mean, this stuff comes from nowhere. I mean, it really does. And that's just speaks to just how incredible they are at player development, as well as finding the players who can make 5-mile-an-hour jumps in velocity. Like, there's just few professional baseball players who I think can do that over one off season. And yeah, so that's something just to be excited. I mean, that's a new person to be excited about. You can definitely make sure to go read up on him. I certainly will. I probably need to just as much as every other fan does. And yeah, that's just awesome to me. It's great news.
Yeah, it's it's really fascinating, because Pipeline apparently has him as an arm to watch in 2026, and their publication came out literally a day before we found out that he's throwing 98. So it's running off the previous scouting report that had him at 91 to 93. So with this new wrinkle, I know there are some people in fantasy leagues who are seeing that. They're going like this, like, okay, let's go. But oh, what a show.
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna wrap it here. We've got about an hour's worth of time. So thank you all very much once again for tuning in to the latest episode of the Padres EVT Podcast in Focus. On behalf of my co-host, Willy Warren, this is your host, Diego Garcia, saying thank you all very much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again very soon.